Oh, I saw your face in the green room there. It's the
Didn't know
face of a
what to do.
disappointed man
It
because
is. Yeah, bitterly disappointed.
after going 3-0 down in the first 3 weeks, after having an abysmal first 2 weeks, it's been a good 4 weeks on the spin for me. And even on the week where you played your captainship, it just didn't work out for you, did it?
It certainly did not. It backfired massively, massively. I mentioned this
So
last week, but confidence is low in the ranks of substandard liaison. We are substandard at the moment. We really are living up to our name. It is disappointing. Desperate. I'm desperate to turn it around. I really am.
I can actually understand that as well, because I know how I felt at 3-0. And it was just like, oh, God, here we go again. Here we go again. And so the feeling of winning 3 genuine weeks on a row, not just the handicap week, is good. But this week was actually really exciting. It was like, I know we did the double game weeks and all that sort of stuff. That's all well and good. But this week has been a genuinely exciting fantasy football week, to a point where we still had something to play for going into Monday. And that's what fantasy football should be about. It should be about making you look at the other teams and what's going on and paying a little bit of attention, but it's getting to understand the rules and the nuances. I think we're both get to a point now where we're a little bit more au fait with the rules than we were. You can see that in our formations. We know where the high scoring potential is. We've seen our teams this week, and people who do regularly watch this, and we cracked 100 again last week, by the way, which was phenomenal. Apparently people do enjoy watching it as much as we enjoy making it. But I think people will now notice we get into a position where we've got a real difference this week, and I think there's going to be an interesting talking point. And considering there are so few games, it's going to be an interesting week, isn't it?
Yeah, so we shared each other, our teams with each other just a few minutes ago. So of course we haven't made any changes. We always do that just before the show, or sometimes I don't even see your team until we're on here. And because there was so few matches this week, I feared that we might have quite a lot of similarities here, to be honest. And we actually haven't, not as many as expected at all. So there's quite a lot to play for here in this regard. There's a lot of like variation that can happen. I think it can swing either way this week, which is good. We wouldn't want us picking almost an identical team each week. So yeah, it's a big one though, because if you go too clear and I lose 5 on the bounce, I'm going to be absolutely gutted. If we could pull it back to 4-all, stop the rot a little bit, then we're all right. We're okay. So it's a big week. It's a big week.
So the last game week, it was actually incredibly close. So substandard Liège scored 55 points. So talk us through the big players and the disappointments for you this week.
To be honest, the big disappointments was I thought I was quite smart in picking Scott Twine, rated really highly for key passes and big chances created in the Championship, playing against a really struggling Cardiff team. I felt like in a game that was potentially going to be a bit of a local derby, of course, have a little bit of spice to it. There might be dead ball situations, which really suits Scott Twine, and Cardiff went a goal up in that game. Scott played 90 minutes, or I think not 90, but most of the game, but 2 points. But I was really hoping for something there. I thought that was going to be my wild card that would get me a few points there, and just didn't. It was a bit of a waste of a pick. Dion Charles thankfully got himself a couple of extra points after going 2-0 down against Shrewsbury. But the big one was Middlesbrough. And I know you said it was a risk picking Middlesbrough. I really didn't feel like it was a massive risk. I thought Middlesbrough were good. All the underlying numbers suggested that they were better than Watford. They went a goal up in this game. They deserved to win the game on statistics and conceded 2 late goals. So that was a bit of a kick in the teeth, because I'm starting to realise just quite how important those teams at the bottom are. The players, you can have 1 or 2 bad, as long as 1 or 2 others kind of counteract that, you're okay. The teams can be the make and the break here. And if Middlesbrough drew that game, didn't concede that last minute equaliser, I would have won, let's be honest. So, and I don't think we would in the end, actually, would I? But it would have been closer, certainly. So I was gutted that Middlesbrough got 0 points. Of course, Bolton we both picked, so it didn't really impact us in regard to you versus me. It impacted us in regards to the overall point scoring, because I thought that was as clear to a dead cert as you could get in the fixture list last week, and they were 2-0 down at one point to Shrewsbury. So yeah, another challenging week where some of what I think are smart picks just aren't at all. So I don't know what my tactic is going forward. Do I just try and stop me clever and just go with the high scoring players? Maybe, I'm not sure, but yeah.
So for those of you who are wanting to see what a winning team looks like this week, now there's a couple of things that worked in my favour. First of all, almost certainly Fleetwood getting I think that was did they draw? Was it? I can't remember. But Fleetwood picking up the points, getting me the 5 points. That got me over the line, because actually I had some really bad picks this week. Josh Madger, just the 3 points, so nothing for him. Aaron Wildig, just the 2 points, which we will touch upon because that was a real crucial one. My goalkeeper, I misnamed my goalkeeper last week, but actually I don't think I did I? Because it was the emergency loan keeper at Grimsby who played last night.
Yes, it
so
was.
there wasn't,
right.
there wasn't actually a glitch. It was the emergency loan goalkeeper. But anyway, there we go. Quite how I'd managed to pick him, I don't know. Captaincy, obviously, Will Aimson, we both had him, but I got the double points. You had Sam Tickle. Mickey Dimitriou's the big one again. But Aaron Wildig, so we got to Monday. You had Scott Twine, just for those who are watching at home. So literally, it was the Newport game on Monday night. Was it Morecambe? I want to say Morecambe.
Oh, I can't remember now. I can't remember who they were playing. It was the Cardiff Bristol City game on Sunday. So there's already a late kickoff that we both had a vested interest in. For me, for Scott Twine, and of course it just didn't work out for him in that game. So that put me on 55. And at the point of the Newport match kicking off, well, just before it kicked off, it was 55 points apiece, wasn't it?
It was Bradford that they played. Yeah, it was Bradford, and so it was it was a tough one. Now, bear in mind, if I'd had the goalkeeper, the Grimsby goalkeeper, he conceded 3 goals, so it may have been the same. But yeah, Aaron Wildig, it was 55 all, and literally you were hoping that Wildig didn't start because then we would draw. You were hoping he'd be sent off. He actually did very little. He scored 2 points this week, which is one of his worst weeks, but it was 2 that got me over the line. So who should people have picked this week, Chris? Who were the top performing in each position?
This is quite interesting. Now I'll talk you through it though. So the top performing goalkeeper, there's 2 joint. Connor Ripley at Port Vale. He got himself 9 points off the back of a 1-0 victory. So clean sheet plus 3 saves gave him 9 points. And then also Harry Lewis of a struggling Carlisle United, also with 9 points, to the back of a 0-0 draw away at Colchester United, making 4 saves with the clean sheet. So 2 League 2 goalkeepers there to keep an eye on. Defensively, there was again 2 top scoring defenders, and again both of them featuring in League 2. Mickey Dimitriou, who has been up there quite a lot, 12 points, so a clean sheet in a 2-0 win against Gillingham for Crewe, in addition to 11 clearances and 4 blocks. And then also Jasper Moon of Harrogate Town featured in a 0-0 draw, surprisingly, against Swindon Town. And again, a clean sheet, 12 clearances, 2 tackles. So really high performing there. Midfield, there were again 2. Someone who's been in and around this area is Jordan Gibson. Jordan Gibson of Doncaster Rovers played in a 3-0 victory away at Grimsby Town, scored 2 and also had 3 shots on target. So that was 15 points. And then also an interesting one here, Ethan Archer on 15 points in a 2-1 loss for Cheltenham away at Barrow. Played 90 minutes, did get an assist, but also had 5 interceptions, which gained him 10 points, just to show the power of interceptions there. And then the top scoring forward, all out on his own, Shiloh Tracy with 13 points, once again for Crewe Alexandra. Played almost 90 minutes, 89 minutes played, 2 goals for 10 points, plus a shot on 2 shots on target as well for a point there in addition. So 13 points for Shiloh Tracy.
So I'm assuming the reason that you have picked only League 2 players there is because it's predominantly League 2 this week, or were they literally the highest scoring across the entire game?
It's interesting that League Two players seem to be, particularly defensive League Two players, seem to be scoring more highly than Championship League Two players do overall. You seem to see there's kind of a far bigger percentage of them in the top few. Maybe that's because League Two games tend to be a bit more direct, tend to have a few more transitions, tend to have more kind of crosses into the box, which means there's more clearances, more blocks, more tackles. Maybe I'm not sure the specifics. The reason I've mainly gone for League Two, or only gone for League Two players this week, is because in both League One games there wasn't really a standout player that I thought I could pick. So I thought let's have a League Two only this week and see how it goes.
Well, before we go on to this week, we will have a look at the current table. Now, bear in mind, this is my widget, so it does show me there. This is the Game Week 9 table. So I was actually 24th. So here I am celebrating. It wasn't actually a brilliant week for either of us. It was a good week for Bloody Injured again. Houghton Street Estate Agents flying there, 551 points altogether. John Leonard, Giants of John O'Gaunts, he seems to be up there quite a bit at the moment as well. A good week for him on 66. Who did the winning team have in it? So Whitworth, Cleworth injured. So that's even with a player injured there. But captain in Demetrio, Theo Vassell, who I happen to know one of us has picked, Payne, Brownhill, and Saints. So just moving down, Jack Null Hall up there in 8th. I don't know if Jack actually watches, but friend of the pod. And he had Paul Farman in goal, who hasn't been playing. Which is interesting. So we'll just go down some of the others for this week. Mac Fenton from our rival podcast is 9th. Mr. Leffler there in 12th. Cornell flying high, 506 better points than me. That's disappointing. So overall, how does that leave us? So it leaves Callum Anderson top on 610. Josh Jones is next on 596. John J. Siddons, John Leonard, that's Amy Jones, make up our top 5. So just going down for any familiar podcast type names. And we know who we're going to get to first, don't we? But we'll keep going down anyway. I mean, there are some familiar names on there. But I am actually missing. Why? That's interesting.
Because you're displayed at the top.
Yeah, I should be displayed at the top. But alas, I am not. But I am... I thought I was above Ben now, but according to that, probably not, because Ben's there on 496 and there's me on 489. So I'm still not above Ben yet. Jesus, I thought I was. Well, that is disappointing. So 39th, but Ben's up there. We will load some more as we keep going down. Where do we get to? Kyle Fox is there. Ben Bowler is there. John Harris, Milton Keynes fan, he's there. There's the 1% Club. Dean Gripton, 62nd on 441. Jack Mulhall, 437. There's Carl Keneally, Jimmy Christopher, Mike Scatliff, and then Substandard Liège on 422, but 2 weeks behind everyone else, to be fair to you. And then we get all the way down into where I used to be. Stu Wells, I'm assuming, has not picked his team for a few weeks, judging by that. And then nearly at the bottom, definitely waiting. And I've just done a pod with him where he says that he's locked out, he thinks now, and he's given up. So there we go. And he's still got 24 points this week. So that is the current league standing. That's the Stacey West League, which is what we're talking about. We are talking about that. And what we're now going to do is have a look at our teams this week. So we'll do what we always do, go through them one by one, player by player, and we'll break down Substandard Liège versus Withcall and I. So let's start with the teams, because we have both gone for exactly the same 2 teams. And it's 2 high-flying teams against 2 teams at the bottom. Now, I sense here a change of tactic for you, because you were all about getting those away wins. Was I told there was only something like 4 away wins or 3 away wins across the whole EFL?
Yeah, there were more 0-0s across the whole EFL than was away wins, which is depressing.
4 away wins, entire EFL.
7 or 9, I think, 0-0s across the whole EFL, which is must be some sort of record. So yeah, I've gone for as near to guaranteed points as you can get with 2 home wins. Now, Gillingham are a really interesting team. Now, as you can see by my selection, which we'll touch on in a moment, kind of heavily backed Gillingham this week. Now, Gillingham started the season absolutely on fire, but recently maybe haven't had as good a run. They've lost most recently 2-0 to Crewe 1-0 to Grimsby in the week as well, off the back of lots and lots and lots and lots of good results. But they're playing against Accrington Stanley, who, despite beating Morecambe most recently, I actually think Accrington are probably the worst team in the league at the moment. And in terms of matchups, I think Gillingham's strengths will nullify any threat that Accrington will have. So it's as near to a guaranteed 3 points as you can get. And similar with Barrow and Morecambe. Again, Barrow just a team that's really solid. Also a threat from set pieces. And Morecambe have conceded the second most goals from headers. And also, have created one of the lowest amounts of expected goals and big chances in the league this season as well. I think 19th for both. So you would expect, in terms of underlying numbers and league table, that we've got 2 home wins here. But what's really interesting is that both you and I picked the same 2 teams.
Yeah, I didn't quite go into XG and box entries and all of that. I just looked at it and thought Gillingham and Barrow will win this weekend. So that was what
the thing is, though, that's the gut instinct. That's the gut instinct. And then I just like to look, well, am I right in thinking that? Because it's early in the season, different teams have played different. Obviously, haven't played everyone yet. Is there something I'm missing? Like, obviously, it came out wrong last week when I looked at Middlesbrough Watford, but I thought, no, there's a big mismatch here, which then impacted my decision. So this was more, it looks like they should win. Let's just double check that the stats and maybe more the styles, to be honest, line up to suggest that is likely, and it seems likely. So, for both of our sakes, in terms of the overall league table, we hope this 2 back-to-back wins there. But it won't impact our little competition, of course, because they're the same teams.
The same teams. Now, I wanted to play some Wimbledon players, but I'm not convinced that their game's going to go ahead still. They've said it's going to go ahead. I think they're playing, I can't think of the playing actually off the top of it, but I really fancied them this week. They've conceded fewer goals than anybody else. They've played fewer games. I really fancied Wimbledon. But I am not taking any risks at this stage. And if there's, I looked out the window and it was hammering it down with rain. I thought they think they're going to play that game. I saw their pitch had collapsed. I haven't gone with that. I had looked at their keeper. Is their keeper Goodman, I think. And I thought I'm going to have him in there. And then I've gone, no, I'm not. I'm going to bottle it. So I've actually backed Gillingham there to not concede against Accrington. I'm looking at the clean sheet, and I know the keepers that make more saves are higher up and all that sort of stuff. So I have gone with Mr. Morris. Now, you have gone with an interesting choice, haven't you?
I have. Yeah, Will Stanway of Barrow, because Paul Farman's out injured currently. So
injured, is he? Okay. Because I thought...
So Will Stanway has played the last few games since Farman's... he was obviously suspended and then picked up an injury. So he's out for a little while, and Will Stanway has been playing. And Barrow... I've written this down somewhere. Barrow conceded the joint second least number of goals. They made the second most number of clean sheets this season. And as much as you're right, is that the goalkeepers that have a lot, and I mean a lot of saves, they tend to score quite highly. So for every, I think, 2 or 3 saves, you get an extra point. You get 5 points for a clean sheet. So best case scenario, you get a busy goalkeeper that keeps a clean sheet, but that's quite rare. And I think what's more likely, a goal. And if you concede 2 goals, by the way, then it's minus a point. So I think, not necessarily for defenders, but particularly for goalkeepers, I think clean sheets is the way to go. And I felt Barrow have got a really good opportunity of getting a clean sheet here. So Will Stanway, formerly of Chester from the National League North, is going to be playing in goal in League 2 for me, home to Morecambe.
Now, the goalkeeper is actually where I've really struggled, because I've had keepers who have been sent off, like Farman, Kaminsky, who didn't even play. I've got 1 from my keeper last week because Sunderland was 2-2. So I'm hoping for something a bit better. Now, I don't really think we have to explain why we've picked Mickey Dimitriou, because he's the highest scoring defender in League 2 last week. The team that won game week 9 had Dimitriou in. The only question really is over captaincy. Now, I've captained him and you haven't. So what has driven you to captain Mr. Jackson?
Well, I'll touch on a couple of things here. So Mickey Dimitriou has scored really, really highly because Crewe haven't conceded many goals. You only lose a point if you concede 2, and Crewe haven't conceded 2 very often. But Mickey Dimitriou has been in the thick of the action for Crewe for a lot of the season. Ranks massively highly for both clearances, blocks as well. So I think he has to play for that, because you expect him to be quite busy against Doncaster. Now, Doncaster absolutely have the ability to score maybe more than one goal against Crewe, so that would potentially be a -1. For that reason, I didn't pick him as the captain. I thought if things do go well for Doncaster, which they have the potential to do so, maybe we'd lose a few points here. So I thought it'd be more. There's a risk aversion here by not captaining Dimitri, but still enough benefit in selecting him compared to other options. The other option I had was Wimbledon's centre-back, Joe Lewis, but for the reason that you mentioned about their game, and also the fact he came off injured in the last game, I decided against it. So yeah, I've gone for Dimitri because if it goes really well for Doncaster and Crewe's really good form does take a dip, because it does seem a little unsustainable with the way they're playing, it could go badly. But the evidence suggests he scores well.
Let me challenge that, because if you captain him, surely that's actually because you don't get double minus points, do you? So by captaining him,
double points overall.
Yeah, so you actually mitigate the potential for the goal, for the conceded goal, because if he concedes 2 and gets -1, you're getting double points for the fact he makes it to 60 minutes. So you're almost mitigating the risk rather than taking a risk.
Good point. Yeah, maybe I should have thought about that differently. But shall I tell you why I selected Ben Jackson instead then?
Yes.
Okay. So Ben Jackson it's been becoming a bit of a favourite of mine, to be honest, at Barrow, Ben Jackson, just like Mr. Wildig is for you. I've selected Mr. Jackson, I think 5 or 6 times now over the last few weeks, and he seems to be quite consistent with his scoring. Now, Jackson scores quite highly for tackles, clearances. He's also a set piece taker as well, and has got a really good delivery from his left foot in his left back position. So I think, as mentioned before, we think Barrow a good shout for a clean sheet in this game. So I think that's hopefully 5 points potentially there as a minimum. He tends to play 90 minutes, so that's hopefully another 2. So I'm hoping that's at least 7 points before he's really had an involvement in the game. He tends to be quite active in terms of tackles and clearances. And Morecambe have conceded the second most number of headed goals this season. So with a set piece taker in Jackson and also someone who's got a really good delivery just in open play, I thought maybe there's a chance here of an assist. So that's why.
So that kind of leads me on to Theo Bassell, because for very similar situations. First of all, I didn't realise about set pieces, but he's the sort of player that might get on the end of one. He's another high-scoring defender. I mean, we've gone for the same thought, really. We've just picked different defenders. I've backed Dimitri, who's captain. You've backed Jackson, but we've both backed Dimitri, and we've both backed a Barrow defender. And Bassell's just scored really well. And also, he was linked with Lincoln. So it's a little bit of oh, I know him. So yeah, that's good. Now I've gone actually into League One for my vice captain, which doesn't mean very much in Jamie McCart, but I think that's going to be a game that Rotherham's defenders will be busy in. I think it's this sort of game where Peterborough attack with the ball on the floor. Therefore, we're talking blocks, we're talking interceptions. McCart is a starter for Rotherham. He doesn't get taken off for Rotherham. He's fit at the moment for Rotherham. So as far as I can see, he's going to be in the thick of it. My aim here is to get 5 points per player. And that seems to be a fairly good average. If you get 5 points per player, you've got 60 points in your actual team, because 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, no, 45 points in your actual team. And then potentially, if your home teams both win by 2 goals to 0, you're nudging towards 60 points. And I think that's a fairly reasonable assumption. And I think Bassell is just a good, solid potential for a 5.
That's fair enough.
I'm
interested in. I was really interested in that game because I think a key player that neither of us have put in that's performed really well recently is Kwame Poku, who looks a cut above the League One, doesn't he? Let's be honest. Yeah. I was really intrigued by that game, but also because both sides are so polar opposites in terms of style, I just couldn't predict it well enough to justify picking a player from either of those teams. So you kind of think, okay, people are going to have a lot of the ball. You imagine they're going to therefore have a lot of territory. But actually, they don't tend to put that many balls in the box. So there's not going to be that many clearances there. They tend to try and create high quality chances rather than a huge number of them. Rotherham are going to. So I thought, does that mean that Peterborough defenders are then going to be really busy? Could I put a Peterborough defender in there? Because they are going to be busy heading balls away and clearing balls and blocking things. But also, Rotherham, because of the sort of side that Peterborough are, if it goes well for Rotherham, they could easily bully them. And Rotherham could come out of this winning 3-0. Peterborough could come out of this winning 3-0. It could be 0-0. So it was, for me, it was impossible to predict. So I didn't pick anyone from that. So I understand why you've gone for it, but yeah, I stayed away for it for that reason.
So next up, you've gone for 2 Gillingham players, one in defence and one in midfield. So I suppose you can group those together, really, can't you?
Yeah. So Max Clark of Gillingham. Again, I mentioned the reason why we picked Gillingham. Both picked Gillingham. I think they're a good chance of a win. And again, I think they're a good chance of a clean sheet as well. Accrington have been quite poor in regards to high quality chances created this season. And again, Max Clark performs quite highly for both tackles and clearances. But again, you get 5 points for a clean sheet, I think. So I'm hoping for a clean sheet and 5 points there. 7 for him playing 90 minutes again. And then any bonuses from tackles and clearances there. I'm not expecting too much going forward here as I was for Jackson. Despite him playing left back, tends to be quite a reserved left back. Does Clark at Gillingham? But yeah, I had 2 or 3 options for Gillingham. I wanted to put a Gillingham defensive player in there, and I kind of put a 2 or 3 different ones in there, and I settled on Clark. And then in the middle, I've gone for Armani Little. Now, Armani Little has played 90 minutes in pretty much every single game this season. So again, hopefully a guaranteed 90 minutes there. Has performed really highly for interceptions, and we've kind of just discussed in terms of the high-performing players this week that interceptions can be really, really powerful. And again, Accrington just seemed to be leaking a few goals. And Little is far from a goal threat, but has scored this season and potentially could get on the end of something. But I wanted to get players that I thought were going to be in winning teams that are going to be relatively busy. So it's going to be a transitional game against Accrington. So I'd expect hopefully a few interceptions there, but ultimately playing for the team that's going to be dominant. So it's an interesting one, but I'm hoping, if nothing else, it was a guaranteed 2 points. Midfield was really difficult this week, I'll be honest. Midfield was where I found it most difficult to pick players. There was a few defenders to pick from that I thought could score highly. Midfield was challenging, so I thought I'd pick a player from a team that I'd backed, basically.
So I've gone for Aaron Weld again, just because I'm getting to a point where I actually think once you've got a player who's doing well, I've watched week after week that those players tend to do well until they drop off. He looked like he dropped off this week, but I just think away at Harrogate, it's a game where they're going to have quite a bit of the ball. Harrogate like to sit off you. They did it against Swindon the other week. I can see him therefore being involved with key passes. Newport will definitely be looking to bounce back. So I think that's an interesting one. Now, I've done something that people on this who regularly listen to this podcast or this video will be shocked about, and I know that it will shock you as well, because I've gone for a Shrewsbury player next. And this is influenced by a couple of things. One, their draw against Bolton, I think, has shown that actually they're probably not quite as hopeless as we think. So they can create the odd chance. Not the top 20 actually influenced me a little bit this week as well, because they put a tweet out this morning with a list of players to win 30 plus tackles in League One this season, and Carl Winchester was up there. What that suggests to me is that Winchester's in the heart of the action, and when I looked at how many points he had scored on average week by week, it was over the 5 threshold that I had set myself for picking. So again, I've kind of gone a little bit on form. Also, I just wanted a little bit of yellow in the midfield because it looks prettier on that. No, I just, I don't know why, because I've never liked Carl Winchester. I think he was at Cheltenham and Forest Green, wasn't he? He's a player that I've always passionately disliked. We haven't backed Shrewsbury, but they're playing Crawley. Crawley are bad as well. I did just on the podcast with Charlie. And do you know, of the bottom 5, so if you take all of the bottom 5 teams and all of their last 6 games, so what's that, 30 games? 1 win. In all of those games, there's only Northampton have won a game. I think Shrewsbury might be just about ready for that win against Crawley. And I think if whatever happens, Carl Winchester is going to be heavily involved. Crawley like to play the ball around quite a bit. I can see him seeing a lot of the ball. You have then double backed another team, Port Vale, and Tolaj. Is that heart overhead because of what you said in pre-season?
Partly, yeah. Partly. It was actually off the top 20 as well, because they mentioned his performance this week. And I was like, oh, yes, that's good. Because it's someone who I really, really, really was excited by last season in the National League. Someone who I watched a lot of and really wanted to do well. But there is head over heart as well here. Just quickly on Armani Little, in terms of Gillingham, I wanted to select a Gillingham midfielder. He was the second highest in terms of average points over the season. The other one was Jake Reeves, who is a bit injury prone. So I thought I'm on a little guarantee to get 90 minutes. Now, I've picked 2 Port Vale players, not necessarily because I think Port Vale are going to win this game, because goals conceded don't really matter for midfielders and attackers, but because I think MK Dons are going to give up chances. Now, Ben Garrity is a player who has had a goal threat historically from midfield. He's a big chap. He does enter the box late. He also scores quite highly for interceptions. MK Dons have had, I think, the 2nd or 3rd highest average possession in League One this season. So you expect the ball on the deck is going to lead to interceptions. An interception doesn't seem to be counted as like winning a long ball or winning a header. It's an interception is intercepting a ground pass. It seems to be how this is measured, mainly because there's not that many players seem to get loads of interceptions. So I don't think winning a duel is classed as an interception on here. I think it is very much getting in between the pass. And he scores quite highly for that, as Ben Garrity. And this is a little bit situational because, and this brings Tolaj into this as well, because they're playing against MK Dons. Now, MK Dons will most likely create plenty of chances. They're going to dominate the ball. Port Vale were very, very happy in their most recent game against Notts County to allow them to have the ball, yet still score plenty of goals against them and win quite comfortably. So I think Port Vale are pretty well adept and well set up to play against teams with high possession. Ben Garrity was going to play 90 minutes, most likely. He's going to be involved in the thick of the action. Hopefully will score some goals. Get some points from interceptions and has an outside chance of a goal threat. Now, MK Dons have not had a clean sheet in their last 6 games. And bearing in mind, they've also played in their last 6 games, Tranmere, Harrogate, Bromley in their last 3, conceded against all 3 of those teams who don't create a huge amount themselves. And they also conceded 3 against Wimbledon, who don't create a huge amount either. This indicates to me that MK Dons are going to give up chances. So Garrity might even be an outside chance of a goal here as well. And again, MK Dons concede from set pieces again. Now, Laurent Tolaj is a player who I have, as mentioned, liked a lot since last season. Really good all-round centre forward. But I think what's really interesting about him is that he's not just a goal scorer. He can score goals, but he's a creator who's got assists and key passes. Now, forwards also get points for key passes here. And he's a player that's had a few key passes this season. So he's got 2 options of scoring points this match, against a team that we expect to give Port Vale chances. So I've got a forward that can score goals in multiple ways, because the reason it's been difficult to select forwards is because they only really score points from goals and assists and key passes. Most forwards you would expect to be selected because of the goals, whereas at least Laurent Tolaj has both in his locker. So that was my thought behind Port Vale. So I'm not necessarily backing Port Vale for a victory, but I'm backing them to play well and score against MK Dons, create chances against MK Dons. So that's my thought process there.
Well, I have gone for Andy Cook. Andy Cook scored 7 goals in 13 outings this season. One of those goals was away at Grimsby, one of his former clubs. Another 2 were at home against Carlisle, one of his former clubs. Andy Cook likes to score against former clubs. He won't be a stranger to Prenton Park. I've literally just gone for the goal scorer. And do you know what? It's funny because when we first started doing this, I was looking to put 3 forwards on. Who's going to score all the goals? And actually, that's not really where the points are. I'm not bothered about key passes. I'm not bothered about any of that. I think Andy Cook's going to score this weekend. And if he scores and if he plays, I don't know whether he'll play 90 minutes or not. He played 90 minutes in his last 2 games, so he's likely to last the distance as well. I know he's an old hand, and also I saw a post about how he's really coming into his own again this season. He's a key player for Bradford. When's he ever going to stop scoring? And if Jay Ben, who has just forced himself into the side, who, as we know, is a Lincoln City player, putting a couple of good assists in for Bradford City as well too the other night, if he's putting the ball in the box, Cook will get on the end of those balls. I'm not convinced about Tranmere at the moment. They're not in a particularly good place. I think they're 17th in the division. They're not ones to keep clean sheets particularly regularly. They've conceded in their last 3 games. One of those, Accrington, MK Dons and Swindon. And let's face it, Accrington and Swindon are not 2 teams that are well known for scoring plenty of goals. They conceded 3 against Colchester, 3 against Gillingham, 3 against Everton under 21s. Andy Cook will score. I'm backing him to do that, and I'm backing him to be the difference this week. So there are teams. I ask you every week how confident you feel. Every week you say either, the last 4 weeks, it's not been particularly good. I think this is going to be one of the most interesting weeks we've had because it's all happening on Saturday for a start. So it'll all be done and dusted by 6:15, quarter to 5 on Saturday or 5 o'clock. I won't be able to follow it because I'll be in London. It's gonna be a good week, I think, this week.
Yeah, it's I'm desperate, guys. I'm getting desperate now. I really am. It will be a really interesting one. I think I'll be fine as long as Barrow, Gillingham, and Port Vale do all right.
Yeah.
Whereas you've got a few teams that need to do well, a few players that need to do well individually. So yeah, all eggs in one basket. But I like to think I've thought about this sensibly. But again, I've done that in the last 4 weeks and haven't won. So
I think your big question, Mark, could be Port Vale. And I know MK Dons have been absolutely terrible, but they are looking at this unbeaten in 5 in the cup. I know they concede goals. I just,
yeah. Like I said, I don't
sure.
necessarily expect Port Vale to win. I just expect them to have chances against MK Dons, and that's why I've split those two players. I was tempted by Bradford, but I've been let down by Bradford a couple of times. So I just, for that reason, I was like, no, I'm not doing it again. I'm not putting myself through that again. So we'll still see.
I've been let down by Port Vale and Barrow in the past. So right, we're 36 minutes in. Clearly, we do enjoy making it. Hopefully, as much as you enjoy watching it. But all that remains to be said is until next week, up with Call and I.
Up substandard Liège.
Don't really roll off the tongue, does it?
No. Up the imps then.
Up the imps.
Lincoln City are the team, the readiest is their name. Sinsel Bank is their home ground and football is their game. So come and cheer them on, you lads, support them all the way. Oh, 'tis hardly life for the red and white, the imps are here to stay. Oh.